Hi, this is Jason, and I'm going to show how to take a simple HTML page and make it available for viewing while offline. I'm going to do that by typing my HTML into this text editor on the left side of your screen, viewing it in the browser on the right side of your screen. This is Google Chrome, and right now the HTML file is empty, hence what we see in the browser is empty. Chrome's developer tools are open down here at the bottom, and we can see all the network requests and the messages that it traces to the console when those start appearing. I also have an application called HTTP Scoop open, and this shows all the requests that go between the client, my browser, and the server, even the ones that Chrome doesn't show, and Chrome doesn't show all of them, which is why I have Scoop open as well. So let's get started by creating some initial content. So this is the beginning of our offline app. And over in Chrome, we should be able to refresh and see that content appear. There's nothing new that we're doing just yet. Straightforward HTML. I want to show, though, that if I stop the server, which I just did, and refresh inside Chrome, we see this error message. Chrome is trying to contact the server to get or check to see if what he'd cached previously is still good enough to render. And we can tell, since we're looking at the HTML as it exists on the server, that yeah, the HTML hasn't changed, but the browser doesn't know that. So he's trying to contact the server to see if the HTML needs to be updated before it's displayed, and failing, and hence error message. This shouldn't be a surprise. This is how the web works. But we're going to change that. We're going to instead tell the browser that we want him to cache this HTML and to keep it cached for a very long time. And to use that cached HTML instead of constantly checking the server to see if there's new HTML. So I'll show how to do that. And we're going to do it by creating what's called an application cache. Modern browsers now have support for this offline, quote-unquote, feature where they create application caches and stuff all the files that make up your application into this area that they manage. We can't really see it, not in a very direct way, but we are in control of when those application caches get created. And it's done with this very simple manifest attribute. By putting a manifest attribute on the HTML element of our page, we're telling the browser to create one of these application caches. The manifest has to describe the files that make up the application. These are the resources that the browser needs to download to put inside the application cache. So let's create that file. We'll save manifest.appcache there in the same folder. Manifests are plain text files. They're not HTML or XML or JSON or anything else. They have to start with this line cache manifest. And if they don't, they're not considered valid manifests. After that, they contain the resources that make up my application. And at this point, I have only one file in my folder other than the manifest itself. So I've only got one file to list here. If I were to now refresh in my browser, we see the same content, we see the same network trace from Google Chrome telling us that he did download index.html. If we were to visit HTTP Scoop, though, and see what he traced, we'd have to look right here and below to see the most recent request. And we request index.html and then the manifest file. That's really interesting because Chrome doesn't show that we downloaded the manifest file. Okay, that's why we have Scoop open. And he actually tried to download it twice. This will make more sense later on, but for now, we'll just ignore that. So Chrome's doing more than what he's displaying. We can see some of that on the console tab where we can see that Chrome's traced creating application cache with manifest, and here's the URL to my file, that app cache file. So because that manifest attribute existed on my HTML element, the application cache got created. At that point, the browser then decided to download the manifest and then download all the files that were listed inside it. Now, if I were to refresh again, let's clear Scoop first. Refresh again inside my browser. We can see that Google Chrome shows a request for index.html, but HTTP Scoop does not. He shows a request for manifest.appcache. What's going on here? Well, back to the console, we can see that Chrome loaded this document from that same application cache that we just created a minute ago, and he checked to see if the application needed to be updated, and he determined that it didn't need to be updated. The manifest had not been modified or changed. But he's still showing the content. Isn't that interesting? Even though no request happened for it, so he read it out of the application cache. Here in the network tab in Chrome again, it looks like he's requesting index.html across the network, but that's not what's happening. He's getting this file from the cache, the application cache. Now I can go back to my terminal and stop the server again, come back to Chrome and try to refresh. The page still works. According to Chrome's developer tools, we did request index.html, but we can see in Scoop that that didn't really happen. Let me clear this and refresh again. Nothing got added to Scoop. Since the server is down, there's no requests or responses to trace here, so Scoop's kind of not very useful right now. Chrome is reporting that the HTML file came from the cache, and that's pretty neat, right? We now are able to visit this page without the server being up. If the network was down, we can visit this page. Chrome no longer cares that the server exists. You can see in the console, or the network exists, you can see in the console that Chrome did try to download the manifest.appcache file again, but he failed. The server wasn't up. The network was down. We're offline. And so he just loaded the resources out of the app cache, which is what you'd probably expect now that we've explained it. So I'm going to start the server again, and we can see that Scoop did record the request for the app cache. It hadn't changed. You can see right here it's a 304 response code, which means not modified. Down here we can see in Chrome that we're checking to see if the cache was updated. No, it was not updated. So we determined that, yeah, it hadn't changed. Now let's go and make a change to the HTML file, because it's kind of a boring app. But let's just add some text. Am I offline yet? I don't know. Are we? We don't see the code, or the new paragraph that I just added in the content. This is surprising to a lot of people up front when they first start working with application caches. Why is it that when I refresh here, I don't get to see the new content? Because application caches, which is where this document is getting loaded from, are really aggressive about how much they cache and how long those caches live, and they have specific rules for how to determine when to update the application caches. And as of right now, you can see that we are checking the manifest and seeing that there's no update. That's weird, but if you think about what's in the manifest, did we change it? We did not change it. We changed a file referenced by the manifest. So the browsers could be really, really smart and download the manifest, look at every file listed in it, and then check to see if any of those changed. But that's a lot more work than the browsers want to do. So they came up with a shortcut and said, if you want us to check to see if any of the files referenced inside the manifest change, then make a change to the manifest itself. And that could be a simple enough change as just adding a comment to the manifest. That's a bit on the cheesy side, I'll admit, but it's how it works. When we try this now, we hit refresh. We can see that Chrome says he's checking to see if the cache manifest changed. He determined that it did, so we started checking all the other resources and re-downloading them. So there's that HTML getting downloaded again. If we were to go to Scoop, we can see that we download the manifest into that HTML and the manifest again. So it's still getting downloaded twice. But disconcertingly, the new content's not here. Something seems broken, and yet it's working exactly the way it's supposed to. When we visited this URL, Chrome loaded that document out of the application cache, and he displayed that document to us. The version of the document that he had was the one prior to this paragraph getting added, which is why we don't see it. In the background, the checking and the downloading and the notification that an update is ready happened after we displayed that old version of the HTML document. So if I just go to Chrome and refresh again, we see the content. Chrome is loading the document from that same application cache, but this time the version of the file in there has the new content in it, and that's why we see this new content. Chrome then goes and checks to see if the manifest has changed. It has not. Therefore, nothing new gets downloaded. That's surprising, but there are ways to make it so that the user doesn't have to know to double refresh to update their application. But that's probably good enough for now to show us how to take a simple HTML page and create an application cache for it. The only thing that you might want to do at this point is undo it. And I'll show how to do that really quickly. So you might think, well, let's delete the application cache by deleting what we typed in that caused the application cache to get created, and that was the manifest attribute. Now I've just deleted that. I'm going to come back into Chrome and refresh. And what's Chrome doing? He is loading that document from the application cache, checking to see if the manifest has changed, determining that it hasn't, and never bothering to see that the application cache's manifest is now gone. Right? We're not referencing it anymore. So I'm kind of stuck. The browser thinks that the HTML still has that manifest attribute, and he's not willing to download the HTML to check it again because he has this really aggressive caching happening. Let's add another comment in here to the application cache just to get it to download again. And we can see that he did download it. And yet it's still always loading our application from the app cache. Even if we look inside here and see that the manifest attribute is gone. So one of the things that we can do to fix this is just delete the manifest file completely. Once the browser sees the manifest file is gone, he gets a 404, not found, response code. Then he deletes the application cache locally. We can also use Chrome to visit this URL, app cache internals, and we can see all of the application caches that we have currently defined. And you can see the one that's defined by the manifest.app cache file. You can open it up and see that it has the index.html and the manifest itself. I'm going to delete the whole application cache. And now when I go back to that tab and refresh, we can see that he's no longer loading from the cache, he's loading from the network.